The mentors for the same are Dr. Pallavi Mahajan and Dr. Ashima Badyal, and the speakers are Sarthak and Ravinav.
Good afternoon, everyone. Now we'll be talking about the famed IEC committee. So, what is IEC committee? Ethics committee is a committee comprising of medical, scientific, non-medical, and non-scientific members whose responsibility is to ensure the protection of the rights, safety, and well-being of human subjects involved in a clinical trial. As you all know, human life is the most valuable. Not most valuable, it's very valuable. Every life is valuable. So, IEC is the mother of clinical research. And it is rightly said so because, like a mother, it guides, it protects, and safeguards the right and health of the subject. Now, types of ethical committee. There are three types: institutional, independent, and central ethics committee. For example, in our GMC Jammu, if we want to do a research, we will have our own institutional committee. And for example, a nursing home has to do a research. They have to form their own independent ethics committee, which will assess the project and then pass. But they cannot intervene in our projects. And if there is a multidisciplinary project, there is a central ethics committee which acts as an umbrella organization and looks after all the aspects. So, who all are the members? We have the chairperson, a member secretary, 1 to basic medical scientist, 1 to clinician, 1 legal expert, 1 social scientist, 1 philosopher, and 1 layperson. So the chairperson basically should be from outside the institute because we have to prevent bias, and member secretary can be from the same institute. So 50% of the members should be non-affiliated or from outside the institution. The number of members should be between 7 and 15. A minimum of 5 to 7 should be maintained, and at least 1 woman member should be included. So this is the Constitution of Ethics Committee. A comprehensive guidance regarding the constitution of the ethical committee is provided in DHR, which is Department of Health Research. But basically, for all clinical trial purposes, the ethical committee has to be associated with CDHO, which you all know is Central Drug Standardization Control Organization. So the same committee can then look after human trials as well, but we can have 2 different committees for it. Now, independence and competence are the 2 hallmarks of an IEC. Its members have to be chosen accordingly. Then again, it said head of the institution, its executive authority should not be part of the IEC to prevent any bias. Now, 3 types of trials are basically admitted to the IEC. They are academic trials, biomedical and health research, and new drug clinical trials. So, what is an academic trial? Just now, we also said an academic trial is a clinical trial for a drug which is already in use, but we are looking for a new indication, a new route, a new dose, or a new dosage form. So, if these trials are done only for academic or research purposes, we do not need the approval of Central Licensing Authority or the Drug Controller General of India. So we can bypass that step. However, in doubt on the nature of the study, the ethics committee concerned shall inform the DC in writing. Biomedical and health research. It's a very long definition, but we'll understand it better with the examples. Research including studies on basic, applied, and operational research or clinical research designed primarily to increase scientific knowledge about diseases and conditions, their detection and cause, and evolving strategies for health promotion, prevention, or amelioration of disease and rehabilitation, but does not include a clinical trial. I just showed the examples. These are in vitro diagnostics, performance testing for research, a new surgical intervention, assisted reproductive technology, public health survey, or epidemiological study. Now, for DHR, earlier there was no regulation, now there is a separate chapter. It is to be conducted in accordance with National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants by ICMA. Now, an ethical committee for DHR has to be registered with DHR, which is the Department of Health Research. It has to oversee the study, and any severe adverse event and compensation is led by EC as per guidelines. So coming to roles and responsibilities, first of all, the whole of ethics is based around 4 principles: autonomy, beneficence, non-beneficence, and justice. We all know about it. It's always asked in the box exam. So role of IEC is basically it ensures a competent review. If you want to do a research, you compile it and give it to the IEC will review it, and it will basically respond to it in a way that it can pass the research, it can give you advice if they want to change something, if something can lead to something bad for the subject. It has to protect the dignity rights, well-being of the potential research participants, to ensure universal ethical values and international scientific standards are expressed in terms of local community values. Now, responsibility of IEC, it is review and approval of trial protocol that you have to give it, and it also has to review ongoing trials so that nothing bad is happening to the subjects. Any severe adverse event is not taking place, and if there is one, they have to forward the reports to licensing authority. They have to review the periodic study reports and ultimately report any changes as well in the research. So you all can go to cdsu.gov.in and you can see GMC Jammu's IEC committee. Now I'll pass the mic to my colleague Sarthak to explain how to seek clearance from now.
Hello everyone. So the good news is that I am the last speaker and you will all replay from this in just a short while. So what I noticed in all these scientific terms which are being thrown around, they provide a very terms are there which are being thrown around and you tend to lose your attention at that time only. So I would encourage everybody whenever there is something like this next time, please do not hesitate to use your colloquial language, which would in turn raise interest of other people who might get drawn out in these presentations. So it's completely alright to use a colloquial language so that people tend to remain interested in what we are saying. Okay. So this is a very important topic. I feel like anybody who's left over here right now, despite such a thin attendance, will be serious about conducting a research. And once you are serious about conducting a research, you will have to face your institutional ethics committee, and I'll tell you, it is a pain to deal with them because they ultimately have to safeguard the research. They have to ultimately safeguard the interests of the patients and the participants. So they are going to try their best to scrutinize you, but then you have to make your study in such a standard that they do not have any problem with that. Okay, so that is what I am going to tell you. So even before you think of conceiving your research question or your research design, there are certain things that you need to be mindful of. As Dr. Vishal said, that your research idea has to be original and free of plagiarism. You can use various plagiarism software to check whether whatever that is coming in your mind has not already been done, because that happens very often. Okay, so next you have to be honest in reporting the data. Many times, this is coming from personal experience. Many times you happen to, whenever you happen to do a research, you are inclined to maybe skew the data in your favor. You feel like, okay, I'll moderate this thing in such a way, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but that is actually going to decrease the validity of the research. Once people are going to question that, once it comes under a bigger public scrutiny, there is somebody who's going to be smart enough to figure out that you manipulated the data, and that is going to disturb your validity for the rest of your life. So please do not do something like that. You have to try your best to avoid bias. Now, bias is like unintentional manipulation of data. You're not manipulating the data, but it is unintentional that you're collecting things in such a way, you're collecting your data in such a way, or you're behaving in such a way that the data that you're collecting is not really accurate. So you have to be mindful of that. Now you have to protect confidential data, communication and record and other documents. I feel like you already know this, that whenever you interact with the patient, they are entrusting you with their confidentiality and you do not have to leak any of that. I hope that is something very obvious. So you also have to share your data and results and disclose the method utilized and the analysis. Whatever the workflow of your research was, when you publish that thing in a journal, it comes and you have to disclose everything. You have to disclose all the procedures you did in order to give birth to that research. So this is going to be scrutinized by everybody. People in academic circles, they actually look and okay, I'll deviate from the topic a bit. What happens is that whenever you're in academic circles, your original research is not given that much of importance than the research which you do to prove somebody else wrong. That is given a lot of importance in academic circles. So you have to make sure that you are doing everything correctly so that nobody else has a chance to disprove your research. Okay? So next we move on to acknowledging the copyright. So somebody else has done something and you are quoting them, you are giving them, if you are citing them in your research, you have to give them the appropriate credit. Otherwise they'll get mad and they'll probably come after you after that. So you also have to protect the safety and well-being of the participants, very obvious. Inform them properly about the ethics and benefit of the activity which you are going to do. You have to provide adequate compensation in case of harm and injury to the participants. Now, whenever you are doing a research funding, you have to keep adequate provision for harm and injury to the participants. You have to fund that thing so that in case any adverse event happens, you are actually able to compensate the participants and not leave them just like that. Okay, so which are the studies which require ethical clearance and which do not? Most of the research activities which involve a human participant, they are going to require ethical clearance. There can be certain exceptions which I am going to talk about, but you can assume this rule of thumb that any research which is happening involving a human is going to require the clearance of Institute Ethics Committee and the CTRI as well, as it has been discussed before. So any research which are the researches which do not require ethical clearance, like these includes the research which generally have a negligible risk research and use of existing collection of data or record that contain non-identifiable data about human beings. Okay, so I'll tell this in the colloquial language. कोई भी ऐसा डेटा जो कि publicly available है, for example, okay, I'll give you examples of that. For example, court judgments, publicly available statistics. 2011 में census हुआ था, right? If you are using that data, that is already available to the public. You're not violating anybody else's privacy. Okay, anybody can go and see that. So that is not going to, if you're just going to analyze that data, that is not going to require the clearance of your institutional ethics committee. Some other examples you can see. For example, official publications which are already in public domain, those things. Public archives, for example, RPCT का birth and death record, that is already in public domain. You may be analyzing that data, so that does not require clearance of your institutional ethics committee. And now, what is non-identifiable data? I said that non-identifiable data जब आप use करते हो, तब you don't require ethical committee clearance. Now, what is that thing? It is the data through which the identity of an individual cannot be traced back to him or her. Or it is that data from which the personal identity identifiers are deliberately removed for the same. For example, you are conducting a research of a repository. For example, blood samples के repository है, a huge collection of blood samples, and you deliberately remove the name of the patient and you give them a code. You don't write the patient's name on that file, you give them a code. So that blood sample cannot be traced back to that person, right? अब उसकी confidentiality को violate नहीं होगी ना इसमें. For example, if you are using a cadaver, ठीक है, a series of cadavers, you are just analyzing a certain specific body part. You are not that's already, first of all, that's already a deceased individual. Second of all, if you code that individual and not put the name on the specimen, then it does not violate their privacy. So this makes this is an example of what is non-identifiable data. Okay, so examples, obviously you understand better the examples, right? So examples of studies that require ethical clearance are randomized control trials, drug trials, clinical trials. These are very obvious. They don't just require ethical committee clearance of your own institution, but there's a series of other committees which you have to take clearance of. And examples of studies that do not require ethical clearance, these are academic review studies. For example, systematic reviews. Systematic reviews where you analyze a series of research papers that have already been published, and you try to draw inferences from that. These are the kind of things which do not require ethical clearance. Then surveys, interviews, educational tests, public observations, all these things, they also don't require ethical clearance. Benign behavioral interventions also don't require ethical clearance. Now, what are benign behavioral interventions? So, it sounds very complicated, right? But I'll tell you what it is. कोई जो सिगरेट के पैकेट पे आप देखते हो ना, smoking kills, that is a benign behavioral intervention. Or you see ads about encouraging pregnant women not to drink alcohol or smoke. Those are benign behavioral interventions. So once you're doing that and you are actually analyzing कि कितनी effective थी ये advertisement जो हमने सिगरेट के पैकेट पे की कितनी effective थी, that is a benign behavioral intervention that also does not require ethical clearance. Analysis of previously collected and non-identifiable information or specimen, which I already talked about, these also don't require. And food evaluation studies, for example, chips के पैकेट में nutritional value जो होती है और how much carbs does it have, how much protein does it has. These kind of studies also do not require ethical clearance because you're not dealing with the human at all. So this is the Institutional Ethics Committee clearance form, which if you are going to do a research over here in this institute, you are going to be faced with this form. You are going to have to fill this form up, and then you are going to have to submit it to the Institution Ethics Committee, which is right here on this floor, just beside the examination hall, Pharmacology examination hall. So you can see what all, like some important things that I'd like to point out in this. If you are doing a drug research, then you have to take approval of BCGI. If human samples are involved, you have to disclose that. Justification of what the study is, study design, aim, objective, everything. Like the whole protocol has to be written over here in this form. And you have to also prove to the Institution Ethics Committee that you are going to take consent of the patient. Consent form you have to attach over here. Whether you have made provisions for compensating those participants in case something goes wrong. It should not, but if in case something goes wrong, then you have to disclose over here what all are you planning to do, how are you planning to compensate the participants in case something goes wrong. So this is all taken account for in this form, which you're going to have to face if at all you're interested in doing research. Okay, so what is informed consent? I was going to elaborate this slide, but it has already been discussed by our colleagues previously. So this is like, you already know this. So let's not waste time on this, because I know how short of an attention span everybody has, right? Thanks to reels and YouTube shorts and everything. Anyway, so this is a proper format of IEC Form, which is under ICMR guidelines. Obviously, it has research description. Okay, so you are going to present this form to the patient. This is what an IEC form is, informed consent form. आप ये form patient को दोगे, आप explain करोगे अच्छे से. You're going to give them enough time to read this form, and then they're going to take a decision as to whether they want to participate in the study or not. So what all does this form have? This has research description. Study में part लेने के क्या risk हो सकते हैं, क्या benefits उनको मिलेंगे, what are the alternatives, कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी उनकी मेंटेन होगी उस चीज की एश्योरेंस, क्या कंपनसेशन मिलेगी उनको इस रिसर्च में पार्ट लेने की, एंड कॉन्टैक्ट्स ऑफ द इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स. जो लोग भी फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई एम डूइंग अ रिसर्च, मेरा कॉन्टैक्ट और जो मेरे साथ वाले कलीग्स होंगे उन सबका कॉन्टैक्ट इन केस दे वांट टू रीच आउट टू यू लेटर. दैट इज ऑल नेसेसरी. यू हैव टू प्रोवाइड इट टू देम. एंड देन वॉलंटरी पार्टिसिपेशन इन विड्रॉल के ऊपर एक आपने पैराग्राफ बोलेगा जिसमें आपने बताना है कि एट एनी पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम इफ यू फील दैट योर राइट्स आर बीइंग वायलेटेड, इफ यू डोंट वांट टू पार्टिसिपेट इन दिस रिसर्च फॉर एनी रीजन व्हाटसोएवर, यू कैन. So you have to explain to them that voluntary participation is like you're going to honor their participation, and they can withdraw from it whenever they feel like. Okay, so for pediatric population, the parents and guardians can give the consent on the behalf of the child. The children can give what is called an assent. Assent is just an informal communication. Okay, we do not have any problem with this. Okay, so when can the ethics board give a waiver of consent? This is also a very interesting caveat in this topic. ऐसा कब होता है कि जो ethics board है, they feel like okay, even if the consent is not there, you can proceed with the research. So this is a very interesting situation. Research on publicly available information. This has already been discussed. Research on anonymized biological samples from deceased individuals, या specimens, cell lines होगी, cell free lines. जैसे repository में cell lines और cell free lines पड़ी होती हैं. If you do a research on that, which is already available, then ethics board on their discretion may waive off the consent. Retrospective studies where participants cannot be contacted. Research regarding medical education. For example, I was talking to someone and they were giving this idea of assessing how good is the new NMC curriculum. So in such cases, like if you are, it is actually a very good research idea. And if you are doing a research to scrutinize the teaching in medical education, then the ethics board may consider giving a waiver of informed consent. In case of research during humanitarian emergencies, when people are not in a position of giving consent, or their express consent is assumed till time being. What is the example of this? When coronavirus pandemic came, we needed to develop a vaccine, right? We needed to develop it fast, we needed to do something. So for the greater good of humanity, it was assumed that it was an emergency situation, which it was. At that time, ethics board across all over the world for research of new vaccines would have given waiver of consent, because this is for the greater good of humanity. Sure, there are some risks involved, but like the risk to benefit ratio is in the favor of humanity as a whole, right? So this is when the ethics board can give a waiver of the consent. When a re-consent is needed, consent तो ले लिया, but आपको फिर से consent लेना पड़ेगा. What are these situations? So, for example, a patient was unconscious and you started a study on them. When they again become conscious, you have to take their consent. Changing the risk-benefit ratio seen in a study. Okay, so you are doing a study, and some revelation comes in the study that makes you think that now the risk is more, the benefit is less. It is your duty as a principal investigator or an investigator to inform your participants कि ये जो आप ड्रग ले लो, इसमें ये वाला हमें नया रिस्क पता चला है. तो क्या आप फिर भी ये स्टडी कंटिन्यू करना चाहते हो या नहीं? You have to explain it to them properly, and if at all they say that okay, we want to continue the study, only then you can continue the study and continue to keep them as a participant. Okay, a child becomes an adult during the study. When the participant was a child, their parents gave the consent. But now when the child becomes an adult, then you have to again take the consent, because he is now an adult and he is responsible for his own decisions and he has an autonomy over his own life, okay? And then change in treatment modality. For example, if it's changing the whole treatment modality, well, this is very obvious. If the whole treatment modality is changing, then you have to take the consent again for the new one. So when there is a possible disclosure of identity through data, presentations of photograph in an upcoming publication. For example, if there is a CME of this sort and you are doing a case presentation. And case presentation, for example, if there is a lesion on the face of the patient, right, and you are asking the patient, can I take this photograph and present it in the CME? Uski identity disclosed hogi, right? So you have to take prior consent of that and take appropriate measures not to disclose the identity if all it is possible. But if it is such that his identity is going to be disclosed through whatever you are going to present in your publication or in any forum of this sort, then you have to take prior consent of that participant. Okay, so this is the penultimate slide. Conflict of interest. What is conflict of interest? Conflict of interest is a set of conditions when researchers or the ethical committee members, institutions, sponsors, financial or non-financial, have a financial or a non-financial interest. For example, a pharmacological company, they are sponsoring your research, and it is believed that the development of a new drug is going to monetarily benefit that pharmacological company. So they must disclose that. It's not wrong to do that, but they have to disclose that, and they have to take proper permissions for that. Okay, nothing should be shady in things like that. So it is also known as competing interest or competent loyalties. So what are types of conflict of interest? There can be financial conflict of interest, which is mostly when pharmacological companies come to scrutiny, right? And what are non-financial conflict of interest? Well, factors like personal relationships, career opportunities, personal beliefs or academic relationships come in conflict with the topic in question, causing the investigator to be biased. Example of this, for example, I do not like this person, right? And okay, it's just an example. If I do not like this person and we are conducting a research together, maybe the data which he has collected, I being the principal investigator say that, oh no, this data is not right, he must have done some bias, and I throw that data off. Situations like this do arise. So you have to disclose this, you have to first, and even if it is such a case that I have no intention of doing things like this, I have to disclose that okay, we may have some sort of conflict and we are disclosing it, and we are not going to let our personal issues come in between the study. This is something that you have to disclose. Okay, and so this is the last slide of this session. Thank you all for being patient. Not this way. So what is the criteria for authorship? Now this is important for you people as students. Maybe faculty, obviously they are going to get authorship, but you as students, if you are taking part in a research, you should know what your rights are. Okay. So if you have done one of these things, you are entitled to authorship according to International Committee of Medical Journal and Research. Okay? If you have made any substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for work. Okay? If you have done any of these things, you are entitled to authorship. If you have drafted the work or revisited it for important intellectual content, then also you are entitled for criteria for authorship. If you are participating to be in agreement with, to be accountable for all the aspects of the work and ensuring that the questions related to the accuracy of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. And if you are giving final approval of the version to be published, then also you are entitled to an authorship. What the order of your authorship is depends upon how much work you have done and also depends upon the decision of the principal investigator. But you are entitled to an authorship if you have done any of these things. So make sure that you make your voices heard. Okay, so this was as promised the last slide, and thank you for your patience, everyone.